Heart scales are amazing hidden items that you could pick up all throughout the Hoenn region. Typically, when turned in, they allow you to teach your Pokemon moves that they used to know, allowing you to get moves back that they have forgotten. While that alone is super useful, there are Pokemon that gain access to new moves that can only be learned with a heart scale, and some of these moves are fantastic. In this video, I'm going to quickly go over how you can obtain heart scales, where you can turn them in, and then we'll look at what I think are some of the best Pokemon to use your heart scales on in your playthrough. Let's get started. First, let's quickly go over where you can get all the hidden heart scales in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. The first one that you'll encounter is on Route 104, right outside of Petalburg City. You can find it right on the beach just south of the Fisherman. For the second heart scale, you're going to want to surf from that exact same location, the beach right outside of Petalburg City. As you move down south, you'll pass one of the bigger islands with the trees on them, and right below that you'll see a tiny island with only 2 spaces on it. The heart scale can be found there. Moving on to Route 106, which is just north of Dewford Town, you'll find the heart scale right below the Fisherman, very close to the shoreline. Then, on Route 109, which is just south of Slateport, you're going to find 3 heart scales actually. 2 of them on the beach, and 1 of them you go into the water. For the 2 on the beach, you can find the first one behind the Old Man and the Zigzagoon, and then on the southwestern side, under the Green Umbrella. Then, you have to use surf to get the other one. You surf down south a little bit until you run into a couple that's stranded on a small island over on the left side. The heart scale will be right in front of them. There's another heart scale that can be found to the north of Rustboro City on Route 115. You head over to the beach, surf north onto the next beach, and it should be right behind that fighter girl that's on the beach. Too many beaches. Moving on to Route 118, which is just east of Mauville City, you can find a heart scale inside this rock. Now to get the heart scale in Lilycove City. If you go to the beach over to the east and run back in towards the city, you'll find a rock where a heart scale can be found. It is at this point in the game where the rest of the hidden heart scales are going to be found on all the water routes using dive and surf. So next up is Route 124, where you'll find a few of them. You're going to want to surf west of Moss Deep City in order to find these 2 diving spots. Once you dive down on each one of them, the heart scale should be right in front of you. Now on Route 126, which you can reach by going to Sootopolis City first, diving under, and then if you want, you can dive back up and surf to the spot to get there a little bit faster. You wrap around the west side and go north a bit before diving again to find the next one. Now over to Route 127, you're going to want to go back to Moss Deep City and surf south. Quite a bit south, actually. This heart scale is deep within this trench, but once you use dive, it'll be inside the rock. And finally, on Route 128, we have 3 more heart scales, actually. You can start your path from Evergrande City if you'd like, and head west. The first one is going to be on a lone island containing 1 ace trainer. It should be right in front of him. The next one should be on an island just south of him. And the last one should be on another island over to the west. It's a much smaller island with only 1 space to really jump off on. And that wraps up all the hidden locations for the heart scales. In addition to all of these hidden locations, you can also find heart scales by either catching or using Thief on wild Luvdiscs. Luvdiscs can be found primarily by fishing on Route 128 with a good rod or a super rod. Each one has a 50% chance of holding a heart scale. Really awesome that there's a repeatable method to get these, even if it is later in the game. Looks like Luvdisc is useful after all. While heart scales can be found in all stages of the game, you won't have to wait very long to actually start turning them in, as the Move Reminder's house can be accessed soon after defeating the third gym over in Fowlerbur Town. You'll have at least a few heart scales at this point to use if you need to. Now that I've gone over hard scale locations and how to turn them in, let's talk about some of the best Pokemon to use them on. I went through every single obtainable Pokemon in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald to figure out which ones would have the best moves available to learn via hard scale. Keep in mind, I'll be mostly looking to go over the Pokemon that are able to get brand new moves from these hard scales. There are definitely some situations though in which relearning a move that you have forgotten already can be the best way to go depending on what strategies you want to use for the rest of your playthrough. Alright, let's get into it. Let's kick things off with Starmie. Staryu does get Recover at level 15, but most Staryu that you can catch are going to be between levels 25 and 30. By that point, they have learned an extra 2 to 3 moves, and therefore, it is possible that Recover could be overwritten by one of them. If this is the case, and you do want Recover for your Starmie, you'll definitely want to consider using one of those hard scales to do so. Recover on a especially bulky water type is very good, especially in the later part of this game. Definitely worth considering. The same thing can be said for getting your Lantern to learn Thunder Wave. Chinchou gets it at level 1, but wild Chinchou that you find can be in the mid to high 20s, and by that point, you could have potentially forgotten the move. Having Thunder Wave on really any electric type at all that has access to it is really important. It's one of the best support moves in really any Pokemon game for the most part, and Lantern is not a bad Pokemon. Blaziken is the only starter that gets a new move via hard scale, and that move is Fire Punch. It's not the best, but it really depends on your situation. Blaziken does get Blaze Kick upon evolution, which does deal more damage and does have an upside with increased crit, but it does come with a 10% hit to accuracy. Might not sound like a lot, but if accuracy is something you prefer to have, then Fire Punch is a very nice alternative, dealing only slightly less damage. That is, until you can gather up enough money to acquire Flamethrower from the game corner later on. Gyarados is a weird one in this generation as far as movesets go. He went from getting Thrash upon evolving in the past to Bite, which is a huge downgrade damage-wise, especially considering that Bite is special in Gen 3. I don't generally like using Thrash in my Nuzlocke personally, because it can be very risky. It locks you into 2 to 3 straight turns, and during that time, Gyarados can potentially go down. But with that being said, I cannot ignore how awful this Pokemon's moveset is in Emerald, especially early on. Your only option for most of the early and mid game is going to be Strength, which is also an HM that will take up a slot as well until you can delete it later on. In this case, Thrash just may be worth it honestly, and I have to accept that. Next up is Whiscash, and with the Whiskers Pokemon appropriately comes with the move Tickle, which I believe can only be learned by this line in the whole generation, outside of egg moves at least. Tickle is a very interesting debuff option for Whiscash. Weakening your opponent's defense and offense at the same time is really awesome in some fights, and any boost at all to Stab Earthquake is usually going to be pretty nice. No matter which one you end up going with, Blossom is better. Both Vileplume and Blossom each get their own unique move via hard scale. Vileplume gets Aromatherapy and Blossom gets Magical Leap. Aromatherapy is a really cool and unique move in Pokemon, especially for this generation. Being able to essentially use a full heal on an entire party at once with a single move is pretty sweet. On the other hand, Magical Leaf can also be very useful in Emerald, despite the damage output not being as high as other moves that you could use. There are just not a lot of options out there for moves that will always hit the target. And there definitely are a few boss fights in the game where this comes in handy. Juan's Kingdra and Wallace's Ludicolo are great examples. The only unfortunate part about these moves is I feel like they could be swapped between the Pokemon. Aromatherapy just seems like it makes more sense on a Blossom, whose playstyle is already more defensive than offensive. And Vileplume is the opposite, so Magical Leaf just seems like it would fit better. But meh, not really a big deal. Both moves are still usable on their respective Pokemon. Finally, we wrap things up with Medicham, who in my opinion will get the absolute most out of your hard scales. Your hard scales will grant Medicham access to every single elemental punch in Fire, Ice, and Thunder, taking Medicham from a mediocre moveset to a coverage god. Truth be told, I've never actually used a Medicham before, but now I kinda want to try it out. On top of this, it also just gets Calm Mind, via level up if you want it. And now all of a sudden, Medicham becomes a special sweeper with both setup and coverage. Really cool design and definitely a great use of your heart scales if you have one. And with that, this video is now over. I'm really glad Game Freak decided to implement heart scales back in Gen 3. It really opens up even more options for the player to choose from, and more types of strategies to build. Let me know in the comments how you have used your heart scales in the past. I would be very interested to know your ideas because honestly, I feel like I don't end up using too many of them in most of my playthroughs, from either forgetting or just not having the Pokemon to use them on. But having a better understanding of all of our possible options will only help us improve in the future. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments what other kinds of content you would like to see on the channel in the future. That's it for me. I'll see you next time.